data transmitted up, generating real value. And of course, the most valuable form of data is payments. Payment in China is 50 times the US. In China, in a typical scenario, go to the farmer's market, they take no cash if you scan. Chinese total payment, mobile payment, has increased beyond the Chinese GDP. And the use of mobile payment is phenomenal because it changes the new entrepreneurial scene. An entrepreneur can make money from day one. Even if you have 1,000 users, if each pay you $1, you've got revenue from day one. You don't have to go through the eyeball story and then figuring out the business model. It's phenomenal for offline stores. If you have a chain of 100 convenience stores and you use Alipay or use WeChat Pay, now you know who came to your store and what they bought. And that's data that could be used to understand customers and sales forecasts and how to place things on the shelves. So suddenly it gives little AI, big AI to everybody. And it's also going to change the Chinese economy from a savings economy to a spending economy. And of course, this is most importantly phenomenal data for AI, because browsing data is just, you all know, what does it mean when you browse to a page? Not that much, right? Some indication of intention, but not that much. But when you pay money, that's a very strong signal of your intent, desire, need, and transaction. And very valuable knowledge about all kinds of things, the merchant, the product, and you. And you can imagine the kind of power we're talking about is Tencent has the kind of power. Imagine Facebook buying MasterCard and Visa and fully integrating all the data. That's the kind of power that Tencent has. So China has all this data, and the Chinese government is very pro-tech. Pro-tech in such a way that I call techno-utilitarian in my book, which means letting, in China we have a saying called let the bullet fly. That means when new technology comes out, it's like a bullet. If it flies and doesn't hit anybody, then it goes on and the government supports it. If it hits somebody, well, then it gets regulated. Very different from the American Western approach, which is carefully deliberate, come up and then debate, come up with the right laws of how to deal with things, right? If there were a Tencent WeChat Pay in the US, you could imagine the credit card companies, the regulators, the people who would lose in the rise of software companies, they would complain and lobby all over the place and say, wait, software companies, they're not safe, they don't know how to manage money. We've done this for 100 years, trust us, don't trust them. And they'll have the hackers, and they'll break in, there will be fraud. They don't know how to deal with credit card fraud. We've done it for 30 years, and so on and so forth. And they would be completely wrong, because the Chinese government chose to trust Tencent and Alibaba, and they ran all over the credit card companies. And the result is, all those complaints are just ways to protect the credit card companies' 2% charge, which today is a tax on your economy, but not in China. Let's take it as an example. Oh, these software companies will have so much fraud. Well, I, as a credit card user, who only use the credit card when I come to China, landed in the US 3 weeks ago. Of course, my spending over the year is 0, 0, 0. I go to the US, I'll buy a lot of things, right? My kids want to, my wife wants to buy things, gifts. So suddenly my credit card usage surges. And with my book tour, taking me to many cities, it triggers a lot of issues. So credit card company calls and starts quizzing me, what's your first dog's name? What's your And I said, well, I don't have any sports. They said, well, you filled something out, you have to remember. So that's the old style credit card fraud checking. What's the Chinese system? Well, in China, sometimes I would use too much money and Alipay would give an alarm. And then what would they do? They would fire up an app and say, oh, before I approve the payment, please scan your face. So, and that's seriously, this is exactly what happens. And then I would take a selfie and then they would approve it. It's so much more convenient. So the traditional financial companies are so wrong that they know what they do more than we in the software industry. So anyway, techno-utilitarian policy, course, the National State Council is very strong with its various messages about the importance of AI. The State Council actually doesn't allocate money, it sets the tone. And then it's up to the local governments to implement and use money. For example, Nanjing as a city says, well, we got great universities, so let us create AI parks. So they create the world's largest AI park. And then in Suzhou, they said, wow, autonomous vehicles are important. Let's take this area of Suzhou and make a two-layered city. One layer for autonomous, one layer for human driving. And then the city of Xiong'an is created, the size of Chicago. And in Xiong'an, it's by default autonomous driving. And it also created a downtown area, which is most prone to deaths by autonomous vehicles, right? Because they're most pedestrians. We've seen in the case of Phoenix how the Uber car caused some issues and hit a pedestrian. So what does Xiong'an do? They created 2 layers of driving. Top layer is a green park area where people, pedestrians, pets, and bicycles will go. And then all the automobiles go into B1. So think of the entire downtown as having 2 layers. The bottom layer is for cars. So what are the benefits? Well, first, a car will never hit a pedestrian because cars aren't allowed on top level and pedestrians aren't allowed on bottom level. What's another benefit? We all know, if we think about accidents, the other big accident was the Tesla accident running into a truck. That was a result of lighting. And those of you who work on computer vision know that lights confuse computer vision a great deal. And when you're on the surface with sun and snow, reflections, cars, shining headlights at you, you will face more lighting variabilities. And that caused Tesla to think the big truck was sky, and that's how it ran into it. So that can be avoided in B1 because, well, first there's no sky, and all the paints can be regulated, all the lighting can be regular, so that computer vision works better. So this is actually the kind of infrastructure spend that I think is wise for the government to do. Let the private companies invest in AI startups, but let the government build infrastructure that helps make the adoption and proliferation of technology faster and safer. So what you read in the media is not exactly correct. China does put a lot of money behind AI, and this is how we see it putting in the money. So, sorry, there's some problem with the slide. Come back. Strange. The red is the China, and the blue is US. So you can basically see China is probably rapidly catching up to the US. And in my book, you'll see that China really began only 2.5 years ago in AI. Now, China Nation Ventures, we began 5 years ago because I worked on AI. We knew deep learning was important. But China as a whole began 2.5 years ago from basically 0, 0, 0, 0 at that point, and now sort of caught up in some of the areas. And in 5 more years, will generally be equal, maybe even a little further ahead than the US. The details as to why the scores are what they are, you can see in my book. But with China and US both driving AI forward, with 2 countries, not one, 7 giants using huge data, training a lot of great people, and lots of VCs devoting themselves to AI, especially SoftBank with $100 billion, and AI becoming increasingly easier to use with platforms like TensorFlow, Google Cloud. This will propel AI forward to be valued at about $16 trillion by the year 2030. This number is an additive value to the global GDP. So that's how valuable it is. If you don't know how much money that is, that's about the GDP of China plus India. But it also comes with a lot of challenges, and challenges including privacy, security, bias, giant dominance, and especially I'm concerned about job displacement. So if we go back to remember, AI works better with more data and in a single domain. That means any one domain job that is quantitative and objective in nature will be gone. And if we plot all the jobs from how creative they are on the right down to how repetitive they are on the left, we will see that many of the jobs will disappear and become replaced by AI. Fortunately, most of you, hopefully all of you, and me, will be safe. But this displacement is happening around us. It is happening in the blue collar. This is our cashier displacement that we funded. For those of you who are Chinese, if you're in Beijing, go to this pastry shop. No more cashiers. Okay? It's a one-to-one displacement. And for those of you who go to South, Guangdong, Fujian, this is a new fast food called F5 Future Store. No humans in it. You go in, scan your face, order your beef noodle soup, or beef noodle, or fish ball soup, or salad, and then the cost is about half of McDonald's. So while McDonald's may or may not displace their workers with robots, even if they don't, these types of autonomous stores, because they have much lower cost, because of no human involvement, they will gain share, and it will result in the same loss of jobs in McDonald's when McDonald's loses share. The white-collar job is all the same, jobs such as telemarketing, customer service, operational staff. Citi has announced out of the 20,000 operational staff, 10,000 will be gone, and there are many, many other examples. So with so many jobs being displaced, can we expect them to all become, the people who are losing their jobs, to become CEOs and scientists? Well, of course not. But what else is possible? Well, if we think about what AI cannot do, it cannot create, but also it cannot love. And when we say love, if we think more broadly, we're talking about compassion, empathy, trust, human-to-human interaction, social, and generally service jobs. So if we think about service jobs that have a human interaction component, those generally cannot be displaced by AI. So therein lies the hope. So if we look at all the jobs, not only on a creativity scale, but also on the social scale, we'll see that there are actually many jobs that can accommodate many more people. And these jobs include jobs like elderly caretaker. There are millions such positions open in the US. They don't pay enough, so they're not attracting applicants. Jobs like nannies and nurses that require some degree of training, but I think it's imaginable people in the lower left quadrant can be trained for the upper quadrant. Jobs like teachers. There can be many more teachers when the routine jobs of the teachers are gone and teachers are focused on becoming mentors. Doctors are becoming compassionate caregivers when their analytical diagnosis job is not being done by AI. So actually, the job problem may be partly solvable by taking these jobs and applying training, whether it's voluntary with someone's own savings or with a corporate training program or a national subsidy to shift the jobs upwards. They can only shift upwards because the most of this, there's some exceptions like radiologists, but for the most part, these are the lower paid percentage of people in any country. Lower skilled, lower paid, lower educated. And to expect them to move to the right-hand side is not realistic. So fortunately, the upper left presents a lot of opportunities. So the blueprint of how people and AI will work together is more like this. AI will displace all the jobs that are low social and low creativity. And AI will work with the high creatives in using AI tools to help scientists invent more things. And AI can be the core analytical engine with human wrapping arms around it, such as in medical diagnosis. And finally, in the upper right is where humans shine with the whole world, come up with all kinds of ideas to work together. There are things we can learn from all kinds of countries in terms of how to create compassionate jobs, how to deal with income disparity problems, how to have gifted and talented programs. So I think if we work together, we can overcome the challenges that are presented. And not to forget, we'll have $16 trillion of wealth that can be used to reduce hunger and reduce suffering, but also help transition the lower left quadrant to the upper left quadrant. So the next 20 years will be full of excitement, full of challenges. Many of you are very young, and you can look forward to that simultaneous challenge and opportunities. But I do think for your children, right, for your children 50 years from now, as they were born, I think they and you will feel very, very blessed Because AI actually in the longer term horizon, 50 to 100 years, I think it will be a human enlightenment in two ways. One is that there's chaos in dealing with job displacement, but when it's all said and done, we will come back and be very thankful that AI is here, because AI is the one thing that will liberate us from having to do routine work, so we can do what we love and think about what it is that makes us human, because it is not our work. And also, as we think about AI as a tool, as we think about AI, it is really only a tool that we control and manage, and we are the only ones who have the free will to control the AI, which is merely a tool. And with that free will, it's certain that we'll be the ones that write the ending to the story of humans and AI. Thank you. Final slide. This is how we stay in touch. This is the book. That's how you get it, and that's how you get the slides. Some time for questions.
Yes. So we will be answering some questions over here, and if you look at your QR code you have in your hands when you check in, you can scan the QR code and type in your questions over here, and I will be monitoring your questions. Thank you for Dr. Li's speech. Let's talk about the questions. So the first question we have over here is that, what do you think about the tension and trade war between China and US, and how will it affect the AI industry?
Well, the trade war is, all trade wars end with a lose-lose. So it's unfortunate to see it escalating to this point. I hope it will get resolved. But as it pertains to AI, it's really a non-issue. Chinese VCs fund Chinese AI companies who build products for Chinese customers. They are completely self-sufficient. For the 5 companies we have, we didn't license any American technologies. We didn't work with any American companies. And there's no IP issue. And also, they don't sell to American customers, nor do Chinese customers buy American AI technologies. AI is so new that we've developed 2 parallel universes, China and US. So I think the good news is, number 1, it's not affected by the trade war. Number 2, it's really not a zero-sum game. The gain of a Chinese AI company absolutely does not come at the expense of an American AI company, and vice versa. So it actually should hopefully pave the road for greater collaboration, subject to what CFIUS and export control might end up. But to the extent CFIUS and export control end up even being the worst imaginable outcome, China is completely self-sufficient in AI and is totally unaffected by the trade dispute. With one minor issue, that is the semiconductor. A lot of AI compute does go on GPU, and NVIDIA is the world's supplier on GPUs. So depending on how NVIDIA is affected, it may cause compute to become inconvenient or expensive for Chinese AI companies. But other than that, no difference.
Thank you. The second question we have is how some of the audiences are interested in how to compete with the tech giants in AI, because you have such a data mass advantage over other companies.
Well, so come to Scinovation Ventures, and if we fund you, we'll teach you how to do that. The way you do it is avoid their strength. I mean, it's very clear, anything related. Just ask the question. If Tencent, Alibaba, or Baidu chooses to use its core advantages to enter your area, are you screwed? If you're not, then it's okay to try. And the other question is, will they? Because there are actually 2 questions involved. Because Alibaba and Tencent are very strong in what they're in, they're actually nowhere in other industries. They have no real strengths in, let's say, hospitality or healthcare or retail or manufacturing or transportation or autonomous vehicles or cars. So I think there are so many areas you can start a company where they're not likely to go into, because for them, it's not an area that will give a big return on investment. It's not a good opportunity cost. Secondly, even if they went in, they don't have a disproportionate advantage to you. So think about the data they have, think about the businesses they have, and pick areas where they're unlikely to come in, and even if they come in, you're unlikely to be squashed. We have a very good track record of backing companies. A lot of people talk about being squashed by BAT. We've had that happen only maybe 1% of the investments. So we have a pretty good way of flying under the radar and getting enough traction. And by the time they see it, it's either too late, or maybe they'll want to invest in you, or maybe they want to acquire you, or maybe they'll say, forget it, it's not worth it. So it's quite doable. You just have to pick the right area.
Another question we received was that, what do you think, which industry will AI disrupt next from your personal standpoint?
Yeah, I think we have not finished at all in the finance sector. Finance is such a lucrative, easy, low-hanging fruit, because all things financial are fabricated, quantitative game that humans created. Right? These are not, there's no manufacturing, no substance, no delivery, no logistics, no warehouse, no high expense, it's low capital expenditure. And also, when your algorithm works, you're printing cash. So that is the great thing about finance. So I think banking, insurance, investments, we've not even begun to scratch the surface. We have one unicorn, but I think at the end of the day, there will be many unicorns related to finance in all of these areas. So that's the lowest hanging fruit. Then after that, I think there are opportunities in retail, especially for China, because interestingly, Chinese retail has fallen behind because real estate is expensive, and building out, copying America would be expensive, because those big shopping malls that you have are very big and expensive, and now they're empty, so it's good China didn't copy that too much. Secondly, as U.S. developed its retail from smaller stores into consolidation by the likes of Walmart and Costco, China didn't quite have that. There are a few brands, but they're not that pervasive. So China is now undergoing a unique opportunity that says, okay, we're not going to build those super malls. Those don't work. What should we build? When we build it, can we have some kind of online-offline linkage? And also, can we incorporate AI in some way? So a lot of real estate and retail companies are thinking that, and because retail is also quite close to the money, we think that's another big area. So those were the big ones, finance and retail. And also retail, it's very clear the number of workers in retail will be displaced by AI as one of the fastest displacement, and that will lead to some of the cost savings. That's another big one. I think the food industry, restaurants, delivery, autonomous fast food, a lot of the Chinese stuff revolves around eating. Because I think eating is very important to Chinese people. So in the US, you see that Uber and Airbnb were the first two O2O companies that took off. The food companies, like I mentioned, Yelp, Groupon, Grubhub, OpenTable, were all much smaller. I mean, you plot the size of the giant American unicorns, you have real estate, very big, that's Airbnb, and you have Uber, that's transportation, cars, very big, and then you've got these four little ones. But in China, actually Meituan is really big as Didi. So that, I think, reflects how much Chinese people like to eat. And I think over time, all these retail as well as food industries will gravitate towards the future where the mid and low end will become automated and cheap. Because most people don't care about, just ask yourself, do you really care about a great service at Pizza Hut or Kentucky Fried Chicken? You probably don't. And if you removed all humans and made the price 1/3 less, you probably go, right? But your favorite restaurant, your Michelin restaurant, your high-end restaurant, your fancy restaurants on Palo Alto downtown, That's all about ambiance and service. And also AI will continue to help more billionaires emerge. Some have argued that the wealth disparity is largely because of the billionaires that come from the tech industry. So they're going to be wanting to pay to go to the most fancy service places. So food and I think retail will separate into very high-end, super luxury, human-intensive to the low-end, fully automated. So AI has a good chance in retail and food. Beyond that, I think healthcare is a big one. That's a little bit difficult because of HIPAA, patient privacy issues. I think manufacturing will be a big one, but that's a bit difficult because I'm on the board of Foxconn. Making an iPhone totally by a robot is very hard to do, not only because of the dexterity, precision, complexity, but also because iPhones change so much from a version to version basis. And finally, you build something and then it's outdated. So I think manufacturing will be a very big one, but it will take longer than we imagine. Then, of course, there's transportation, autonomous vehicles. That's actually pretty far away, but because the entire industry has caved, right? If you think about every auto manufacturer, they've accepted autonomous vehicle is the future. If you look at all the parts makers like Bosch, they've given up. If you look at all the VCs and investors, money is going like crazy into EVs and even more into autonomous vehicles. If you look at talent, the smartest AI people are going to autonomous companies. So with all these things aligned, I think autonomous vehicle will probably be faster than the most conservative people project, and will bring about a big disruption. So I think that pretty much covers maybe half of the world's industries. Of course, internet is still possible. So I think all those are good, and I think it's really kind of the human touch, high-end service, entertainment. Those will be relatively untouched by AI, but everything else will gradually be upgraded by AI, more profit, more usage, more revenue, less cost.
Thank you. In line of the healthcare industry, you just mentioned, there are some people asking about what do you think of the privacy issues brought by AI? Privacy issues that can be affected because of the success of AI.
What issues?
Privacy issues.
Privacy issues. Yeah. Well, as a cancer survivor, I think we have to revisit privacy. I'm a big proponent of privacy. When people should be given safeguards, not to give their privacy in some way to potential abusers, to commercial uses, to other uses. I think we have to come up with ways to safeguard privacy. I think when one trades privacy against social good, such as curing cancer, I think we need to completely use a different lens to apply that. I would love to donate all of my cancer records to any AI company that wants it. I think 90% of the cancer survivors and non-survivors will feel the same way. And I think laws that prevent us from doing so are ridiculous because people are willing to give the data. Some degree of anonymity is good enough. I don't need it to be perfectly hidden. I would even be willing to donate without any privacy. So I think when it comes to a greater social cause and good, and even if there are some risks of losing privacy, I think we really have to rethink as a society about applying privacy just because Facebook screwed up. Letting that one issue make us raise a privacy flag against any use of our data, even though it might be for such a great improvement of humanity, cancer treatment and greater health and fewer lives lost. I think that obsession with privacy, I am personally very much against that.
Thank you. So in your talk, you mentioned a lot about the U.S. companies and Chinese companies, and it appears that the companies from those two countries will be leading the world in AI. So what do you think about the opportunities for other countries, like other small countries, European ones?
Okay. Well, one caveat on the previous question. I don't mean that your data should be taken without your consent, right? Obviously, any data contributed to any cause, including fighting cancer, requires patient consent or user consent. But I'm just saying, don't make it hard when you have the consent to get the data and use it. I mean, in America, there are only 20,000 cases of patient-consented longitudinal studies of cancer. So we would love to fund a cancer company, but there's no data. So that is basically perpetually delaying the real progress in cancer treatment. So coming to your second question about the U.S.-China in implementation, what about other countries? Well, it doesn't bode well for other countries. As my New York Times op-ed has stated, just like in the Olympics, there are 3 medals. If you come in number 4, you don't have a medal. So in this AI race, there are only 2 medals. And US and China will both get a medal. The question is who gets the gold, who gets the silver. So there are no other medals to be had. The 2 countries will have 90% of the value in the AI of the world. The rest of the countries can try to get the remaining 10%. You know, on the flip side, it's okay for some countries like Israel, Canada, France, UK. You know, they'll get their 2%, 3%, and relative to their GDP and population size, it's a pretty outsized benefit to them. So it's not like they'll not get benefit, but just compared to the size of US and China with the corresponding research technology lead and China's implementation speed, I think there's just no match for this. Having said that, there are things other countries can do in light of the AI revolution. I think it would be very wise for every country to pick their best and brightest and send them to US for AI education. I mean, I'm talking about even very poor countries with a large percentage of people in their poverty. They think about long term, right? A couple of super AI superstars trained in the US, going back to the country, they will find opportunities. There will be AI things that US and China can't do in that country. You know, things like, I talked about Meituan, right? The delivery, 600,000 people. Think of China as a market, think of US tech company trying to go into China to build a Meituan. That would be impossible. Think about a Chinese company that tries to go to another highly populous country to build another Meituan. That would be very hard. So there will be such opportunities left, but if you can't do it, you don't have some talent. So some way to find the money for the top talent to study is important. Figuring out what service industries or local offline service industries that aren't subject to US-China taking over, that's important to the country. And then the other thing on the non-AI side, I think it's important for non-US, non-China countries to consider is that for those developing countries that aspire to use the China or the India model, both models are going to be gone. The China model is use cheap labor to get some money and then keep going until you have a wealthy economy. The India model is to use this English-speaking population to outsource work that the West doesn't want, and then use that to bootstrap the economy. Both opportunities will be completely gone in the world in 10 years because those are the very jobs, because they're separable from the Western economy, right? Outsourced manufacturing, outsourced call centers, because they're separable for China and India to do. They're separable for robots to do also. So those jobs will be gone. So a populous country that's underdeveloped, it's very important that their policy does not include copy China or India, but rather they have to figure out something in this new service-oriented, people, empathy-oriented economy. Can they be exporters of service providers, elderly care, nannies, and so on? That might be a much more viable way than the manufacturing or call center outsourcing.
So for many of us over here, we are students in the US and studying engineering, science at their college, and many of us are wondering like which kind of startups would you recommend and where should we start the startups here like at this time in the next 10 years?
Well, if you need an H-1B visa to start a startup in the US, you're not getting one. So that pretty much rules out the US, right? For those of you who love the US, you gotta tell the government to stop that because because that's going to be a large flow of great entrepreneurs who are trained in AI and other things who are forced to leave or work for an American company. But the powers of entrepreneurship and the attraction, I mean, naturally, some percentage of people want to be entrepreneurs. And if the US doesn't permit graduating students to do that, then it will lose a lot of the talent that comes here. So for the Chinese people on H-1B, well, welcome back to China. We'll be happy to fund you or any of our friendly competitors in DC. I think we're at an age where tech-based entrepreneurs are very welcome in China. Although I do want to warn, because most entrepreneurs probably will have tech background. You're a GSP, right? But, engineering, great, okay. So engineers, be careful, because the days of the research engineering-driven companies in China are basically over. So if you have your PhD in AI, it would be great for you to be a co-founder in a company, but it would be much better to have someone who's been in China longer, who is in business, whom you trust, to kind of run the business side of that. Our latest investment company called 创新旗帜, English is called AI Innovation. This is a company you should take a look at. Its composition of the CXO are actually a mixture of CEO who has a sales background, because AI is largely B2B enterprise. So you got to know how to sell the product. And then the chief operating officer is a product/solutions person. And then the CTO is, of course, an AI person. So if you have an engineering background, you think you have some unique skill sets in technology, then look for the other two people if you can. And if you can't, we can help you matchmake. And the only way you can build a company just by yourself with a US PhD in AI is if you really know something nobody knows how to do. And you can just, build that thing that will come out so much better than everyone else's. So unless you have that skill set, which is very rare, it's well advised that you recognize AI is now in the implementation phase. You can all be very envious of Professor Tang Xiao, or Dr. Sun Jian or Ying Xi. These are kind of the early PhDs who became great CEOs because they were born at the right time. You were born a little later, but that's life. If you've read the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, right? It talks about you got to be born at the right time. Why is it that people born in September are better baseball players? Why is it that Steve Jobs, Larry Ellison, and Bill Gates were all born in early, the mid-50s? There were reasons for that. And why I ended up working for them, right? and also why the Larry, Sergey, and a bunch of them were born in their age, and I ended up working for them too. So I was born at the wrong time. You have to be, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and Larry Ellison were born at the time when if you were a rich American high school kid who went to a good high school that had mainframe computers, you got to be the first set of people who touched them. Then you have an inspiration, drop out of college and change the world. That's the magic formula. When I went to high school, every high school had a mainframe computer, so there's no differentiation anymore. So accept the fate. The AI PhDs who got to found companies and become billionaires, well, that's their generation. You can work for them or be a CTO in a new startup, but history changes, and you have to kind of be at the right place at the right time.
I think we have time for one last question.
Okay.
Last question would be kind of personal. What's your favorite app and why?
Well, my favorite app, I guess it has to be WeChat. I spend, lately, because I'm publishing my English book, I spend probably about a third of my time in WeChat. But when I'm not using all these English apps and publishing my book in English, WeChat's probably more than half. It brings great convenience. It's the giant Swiss Army knife, and it shows you the power of a monopolistic company that has some user empathy. They're actually pretty good. I mean, Alan Zhang is a phenomenal leader. He protects the user, and he minimizes the excessive monetization and presentation of junk to us when we use WeChat. So while a lot of Chinese apps have a lot of junk in them, I won't claim them, you know who they are, WeChat has actually done a pretty good job. I don't know how long that will continue. I also at the same time see that when you have a Swiss Army knife that takes a whole population's 50% of their time, it's quite dangerous. It will stifle innovation, it will create so much power that either you become a part of them, assimilate, or you fight and lose. So there are all these downsides as well. But nevertheless, as a user, I find that the gains that I have in my productivity, entertainment, connecting to people I love, connecting to my company, connecting to people has greatly increased because of the sound. So I think it's doing more good than harm, although I do have some concerns if this continues and they get more power.
Thank you very much for Dr. B coming over here.
If you have my book, if you want me to sign it, I can do it in the next 5 minutes. Okay? Yeah.